Coming up in a newscast tonight. President Moon Jae-in sits down for talks with his French counterpart Emmanuel Macron. The South Korean leader is expected to ask Macron for his support in getting the UN Security Council to ease some of the crippling economic sanctions on North Korea. Seoul and Pyongyang hold another round of high-level meeting today. Among other things, the two sides set dates for various inter-Korean talks and sign off on holding groundbreaking ceremony to mark the start of construction of railways and roads. South Korea's Ministry of Patriots and Veteran Affairs plan to step up efforts to find descendants of the country's independence activists. The descendants of some 6,000 of these national heroes are yet to be identified. News Center begins now. It's 8 p.m. here in Korea, live from our studio in Seoul. This is Arirang News Center. Welcome to our program. I'm Daniel Chan. President Moon Jae-in's greeting to Paris begins Tuesday local time with the official start of the welcoming ceremony. During the summit with his French counterpart, the South Korean leader will work on bringing the country on board the peace drive on the Korean Peninsula. Shin Se-min has our top story.
It'll be one of the few events of its kind this year in the French capital of Paris. President Moon, on a 5-nation tour of Europe, will be greeted with official ceremony for his state visit, which the South Korean presidential office said is extremely exceptional, given that France only hosts 2 or 3 state visits a year. And that rare opportunity will be followed shortly by the South Korean first couple paying tribute to the unknown fallen soldiers of the Korean War. Then the sit-down between the two leaders, their second since both of them took office in May last year, their last one held on the sidelines of the G20 summit in Germany. The main thrust of his meeting with the French president, of course, asking for Emmanuel Macron's help in getting the UN Security Council to roll back some of the economic sanctions crippling North Korea. France, one of the Security Council's permanent members and a leading nation of the European Union, is deemed critical to moving the needle of the U.S.-led sanctions in a more encouraging direction, perhaps a reason why the 5-nation tour begins with France. And following the Moon-Macron summit will be a joint presser. Then President Moon will meet with the Speaker of the French House of Representatives and then a state banquet in President Moon's honor. President Moon is hoping that the summit in France will help bring the 5 permanent member nations of the UN Security Council, the US, the UK, France, Russia, and China on board his drive for ultimate peace. And once that's done, the president will head over to Italy, where he'll continue that momentum with the head of the Roman Catholic Church, Pope Francis. Shin Se-min, Arirang News, Paris.
Staying in Paris, President Moon met with the press there to share his vision for the Korean Peninsula and Northeast Asia. He emphasized it's time for the world to show Pyongyang that it made the right decision. Hwang Ho-jun shares with us his remarks.
Speaking to France's conservative daily Le Figaro, President Moon touted France as one of the most important nations contributing to peace and prosperity on the global stage. The South Korean leader thanked his French counterpart Emmanuel Macron for France's strong support for his administration's North Korea policies. President Moon said planting the seed of peace on the Korean Peninsula is part of the process of ensuring peace and order in Northeast Asia. President Moon reiterated his desire to form an East Asian rail community, a proposal he made in August to bring together 6 Northeast Asian countries and the U.S. to shore up the region's economic and security foundation. Touching on Europe's multi-nation treaty ratified in 1952, the European Coal and Steel Community, initiated by French diplomat Robert Schuman, President Moon said it played an important part in establishing the European Union as it exists today. The president also teased the next big event on his tour of Europe, his sit-down with Pope Francis at the Vatican. With North Korea expected to be the main focus of his discussions with Pope Francis, President Moon said it's time the international community answers the decision made by North Korean leader Kim Jong-un to steer the regime away from its nuclear and missile programs. He said the world needs to verify that the North is genuine about its willingness to denuclearize and help North Korea take the path to peace. President Moon added he would pass on Kim's message to Pope Francis when they meet. Kim reportedly told the South Korean leader during their recent summit in the North Korean capital that he would, quote, ardently welcome Pope Francis if he visited Pyongyang. Hwang Ho-jun, Arirang News.
France has the world's seventh biggest economy, the third largest in Europe, trailing behind Germany and Britain. While in Paris, President Moon Jae-in is expected to strengthen bilateral economic cooperation. Kim Ji-yeon zooms in on where the two sides are likely to collaborate.
France is Korea's 29th trading partner, and demand for Korean goods is on the rise, helping Korea's trade deficit to France lower to around $2.8 billion in 2017. A report by the Korea International Trade Association shows automobiles took the top spot among Korean export goods to France. Sales from Korea's largest automaker Hyundai Motor to France alone climbed by more than 22% during the January to August period from the same period last year. Cooperation between Seoul and Paris in the auto sector is expected to take a boost as Hyundai Motor signs a trilateral deal with two French multinational companies, Air Liquide and Engie, to increase the number of hydrogen vehicles to 5,000 units by 2025. Apart from French gourmet foods, Korean imports from France, such as aircraft and its components, rose by more than 53% during the first 8 months this year from the same period last year to nearly $1.4 billion. The report projects French demand for Korean premium consumer goods, especially those related to healthcare, could rise, given that the rapidly aging French population has high purchasing power, with income per capita standing at an estimated $38,000. The report also says Korean startups trying to advance into Europe could eye France for assistance, where both local and foreign IT startups are nurtured through its Love French tech policy. France is also home to the world's largest startup campus, Station F, which hosts some 1,000 startups that receive support from world-renowned accelerators, including Facebook, Microsoft, and Korea's largest internet portal operator, Naver. Kim Ji-yeon, Arirang News.
The two Koreas held their fifth round of high-level talks of the year today at the truce village of Panmunjom. They have agreed on a slew of action plans and set a number of dates for various inter-Korean talks. The most eye-catching plan holding a groundbreaking ceremony later this year for linking railways and roads. Woo Jung-hee tells us more.
Despite concerns about international sanctions, South and North Korea are going ahead with the groundbreaking ceremony later this year to link up their railways and roads. At this year's fifth round of high-level talks on Monday, Seoul and Pyongyang signed off on holding the ceremony in late November or early December.
We are closely coordinating with UN Command. The North made no mention of the U.S., nor did it voice any complaints about the U.S. regarding railway and road inspections.
But considering that the international sanctions are still in place and therefore resources and infrastructure cannot be brought into the North, realistically, Seoul says it's difficult for construction to start right away. But for detailed inspections, they'll start looking at sections of railway in North Korea that couldn't be checked back in August because of the UN Command's disapproval. Plus, the two Koreas say they'll be holding another round of Red Cross talks next month to discuss the issue of war-torn families.
We agreed to hold the Red Cross talks in November to strike a final deal on restoring the permanent meeting facility for families separated by war and on enabling video reunions and video messages. We also talked about the North rescinding its confiscation of our assets at Mount Kumgang.
And a series of inter-Korean talks are to take place later this month at the Kaesong Joint Liaison Office on forestry cooperation, medical care, and sports exchanges. Generals from the two sides will also be meeting as soon as possible to discuss running a joint military committee. Exchanges in arts and culture will keep going as well. South and North Korea will continue communicating to fine-tune the details for a concert in Seoul this month by a North Korean art troupe. They'll also be meeting on working levels to bring over relics from North Korea to display them at an exhibition in the South later this year. Woo Jung-hee, Arirang News.
Recently, the U.S. formally announced it might impose secondary boycotts on parties that trade with the targets of existing sanctions. There's been speculation that the warning was directed specifically at South Korea for its recent exchanges with the North. But Seoul's foreign ministry says that is not true. Lee Ji-won provides a closer look.
South Korea says the warning about secondary boycotts was meant to boost the public's awareness and knowledge of Washington's sanctions on Pyongyang. The U.S. early this month added the phrase secondary sanctions risk to 466 organizations and individuals already sanctioned for North Korea-related issues. These are entities on the specially designated nationals list. An official at Seoul's foreign ministry told reporters on Monday that the move comes as there are continuous updates to the list and that not many ordinary people or firms have a thorough understanding or awareness of the risk of the secondary sanctions. In fact, the Trump administration updated its sanctions list 8 times this year alone. The official said that Washington's sanctions on the North had hinted previously at the risk of secondary sanctions, but that the recent move provides an official basis for imposing those penalties on foreign firms and individuals. If sanctioned, the entities could be fined and be put on the list of specially designated nationals themselves, which would prevent them from entering the U.S., trading with American firms or individuals, and would see their assets in the U.S. frozen. The South Korean official was clear that the move is not seen as an indirect message to Seoul about its growing exchanges with the North. No South Korean firm or individual has been placed under Washington's unilateral sanctions so far. But the official said whether or not an act violates the sanctions is based solely on U.S. judgment and thus could be ambiguous. And to further promote their policies and prevent unintentional violations of the sanctions, the U.S., said the official, is carrying out various outreach programs around the world. This includes a conference call the U.S. Treasury Department held with 7 South Korean banks last month to let them know what they can do to stay within the sanctions boundaries. The official said this outreach is being done in close cooperation with the South Korean government, and Seoul too has been working with relevant ministries to keep locals updated. Lee Ji-won, Arirang News.
U.S. President Donald Trump has again said he trusts North Korean leader Kim Jong-un. In an interview with CBS, he claimed that everything is going well in his administration's dealing with the regime and that there have been already great achievements. Park Hee-jun reports.
And then we fell in love, okay? No, really. He wrote me beautiful letters, and they're great letters. We fell in love.
When the host of CBS 60 Minutes asked the U.S. president whether he really loved North Korean leader Kim Jong-un, infamous for oppressing his people and assassinating his half-brother, the U.S. president tried to clarify that it was just a figure of speech. But throughout the interview, President Trump had nothing but positive things to say about the progress being made with the North and about Kim himself. First, he called his policy on North Korea a great achievement, saying the situation has changed a great deal from what would have ended in war. And although it's still unclear whether North Korea is really closing up weapons facilities or whether it has really stopped building missiles, Trump expressed faith in the regime based on how it hasn't conducted any tests in recent months. And that faith also appears to come from his good relationship with the regime's leader. According to Trump, what he and Kim Jong-un share is good energy and good chemistry, which was what stopped the hostile threats that they'd exchanged during his first few months in office. But that doesn't appear to be enough for President Trump to ease the sanctions on North Korea. That's something he said he has no plans to do yet, emphasizing that, quote, this isn't the Obama administration. Park Hee-jun, Arirang News.
A handful of U.S. Congress members are calling on their president to discuss holding reunions for Americans who have relatives in North Korea during his next summit with Kim Jong-un. In a letter, the 3 congressmen asked Trump to initiate family reunions as soon as possible, as time is running out for the families, who are mostly senior citizens. There have been 21 inter-Korean family reunions held so far, but none for the 100,000 Korean Americans separated from their families for 65 years since the end of the Korean War. Although 100,000 families are registered under the American Red Cross, Congressman Brad Sherman's office estimates that number is closer to 250,000 if unregistered families are taken into account. Turning to the latest on the climbers who died in the Himalayas, Seoul's government is planning on ways to bring the bodies of 5 South Koreans back home as soon as possible. The quick response team from the foreign ministry is traveling to Nepal to deal with the process. Hong Yu gets us up to speed with the developments.
The bodies of 5 South Korean climbers who died in the Himalayan mountains will arrive back at Incheon Airport on Wednesday morning. The climbers were on an expedition to make a new trekking route when their camp on Mount Gurja was swept away by a strong storm. The weather conditions made it difficult for the 2 rescue helicopters, which were sent early Saturday, to look for the bodies. On Sunday, when the rescue helicopter finally managed to land, the bodies of the 5 South Koreans and 4 Nepalese guides were found near their base camp. The bodies were then moved to Kathmandu, the capital city of Nepal. At the moment, the families of the deceased are having difficulty getting plane tickets to Nepal since it is the trekking season in the Himalayas. So rather than cremate the 5 bodies, the Korean embassy in Nepal and the Nepalese government are planning to embalm the bodies and transport them to Korea. The bodies should depart from Kathmandu on Tuesday, 11:50 p.m. local time and arrive at Incheon Airport around Wednesday, 5 a.m. local time. Meanwhile, a quick response team from the South Korean Foreign Ministry will head to Nepal on Monday afternoon to provide administrative assistance when transporting the bodies.
First of all, I express my deepest sympathy to those who have been killed. We will provide our fullest support so that the deceased climbers can return to their families. We will also provide administrative help.
Hong Yu, Arirang News.
Moving on to other stories now. Next year will mark the 100th anniversary of the March 1st movement and the establishment of South Korea's provisional government, which is why there are plans to amp up efforts to find the descendants of the independence movement activists. Kim Jong-un explains further.
South Korea's Ministry of Patriots and Veterans Affairs said on Monday that it will launch a campaign aimed at finding the descendants of Korea's independence activists. In particular, the ministry said it is focusing on the descendants of those who fought against Japan's colonial rule from overseas. In many cases, the children and grandchildren of these independence activists are oblivious of the tremendous contribution their ancestors did for Korea. As such, the government said it will join efforts with Korean media outlets that have international branches, such as the US and China, and work with them to find the descendants. According to the latest data, 15,000 people have been recognized as independence movement activists, but the descendants of about 6,000 of them are yet to be identified. The official website of the Ministry of Patriots and Veterans Affairs provides a full list of the independence fighters for anyone wishing to check on their ancestors. Kim Jongun, Arirang News.
The National Assembly is now into its second week of government audits. Today, the National Statistics Agency was in the hot seat, with the opposition claiming that the government's economic policies have worsened people's livelihoods, pointing to data showing sluggish job growth and declining income among low-income households. They also question whether the replacement of the agency chief came as a result of pressure from the presidential office in light of the poor data, raising concerns of data manipulation. The ruling party argued that wasn't the case, adding that it was part of a normal reshuffle. At the audit of the Fair Trade Commission, rival parties clashed over regulations on conglomerates. While the ruling party said the regulations are needed to ensure a balanced economy, the opposition claimed that the policies are eroding companies' global competitiveness. During the Defense Committee audit, rival parties called for a thorough investigation into the Marine chopper crash back in July, adding that appropriate follow-up measures need to be taken. The Ministry of Culture and the Foreign Ministry revealed their draft proposals for South Korea's new passport design, which will be used from 2020. For the first time in 32 years, the cover will shed its green color and change to navy. Each page will include illustrations of Korea's cultural heritage. The passport numbers will also change, with an alphabet letter inserted in the middle to increase the number of possible sequences. The resident registration digits will be removed to prevent leak of personal data. The government will announce its final design in December after taking public opinion into account. South Korea will officially declare an end to the Middle East respiratory syndrome case that occurred in September as of Monday midnight. One patient was confirmed to have contracted MERS on September 8th, which was the first case since a major outbreak of the virus in 2015. The patient was confirmed to have fully recovered on September 17th after being treated in quarantine at a local hospital. The World Health Organization rules that a country is free from a MERS outbreak if there are no new patients for 4 weeks, twice the maximum latency period after the confirmed patient has recovered. The European Bank for Reconstruction and Development held a conference in Seoul today to share its knowledge on transforming state-owned enterprises. Officials from the institution talked about the importance of helping SOEs to reform and prepare for privatization so that those transformations benefit the public. The Vice President for Policy and Partnerships at the EBRD highlighted how countries can learn from each other's experience of reform.
So we've accumulated a lot of experience of how you do reform of the electricity sector, of the transport sector, and how we can bring the best quality of service at the lowest cost. And the idea of this seminar is to share experience, to learn from the experience of our 38 countries, to learn lessons from experience of Korea, and to be able to build on that.
South Korea's Ministry of Economy and Finance also took part and talked about the nation's efforts in the area, such as evaluating performance and encouraging public participation. The nation's pro baseball league, the KBO, wrapped up its regular season, and now 5 teams will duke it out to clinch the 2018 Korean Series title. The Seoul-based Doosan Bears have been dominant this year, but according to Lee Seung-jae, anything can happen in the postseason.
The KBO League season, which ended later than usual this year due to the Asian Games, drew to a close on Sunday after an exhausting 144 games for each of the 10 teams. The 5-time Korean Series champions, the Doosan Bears, took control of the season early and never looked back, finishing first 14.5 games ahead of the SK Wyverns in second. Thanks to the league's best defense, depth, and starting pitching, the Bears earned a straight ticket to the Korean Series, where they are hoping to win the team's 6th title. But no team is more excited to make the postseason than the Hanwha Eagles, who make it for the first time in 11 years after finishing 3rd in the regular season. With the addition of a new manager in Han Yong-duk, the Eagles played with a new mindset and improved confidence. Despite the 144-game season, it took until the 141st game of the defending champions Kia Tigers to sneak into the final playoff spot after defeating the Lotte Giants 6-4 on Friday. Despite dominating the 2017 season, struggles in the bullpen and key injuries marred their season as they look to rebound against the Nexen Heroes during the wildcard series, which begins on Tuesday. The 2018 season was also filled with disappointment for some teams. The Lotte Giants, despite having 3 players with the most hits in the season, ended the season early, just a game behind the Kia Tigers. The LG Twins, having signed former Major League slugger Kim Hyun-soo during the off-season, collapsed in the second half of the season, finishing 8th. But the biggest surprise were the NC Dinos, who finished dead last despite finishing runner-up in 2016 and 3rd in 2017. Struggling with injuries all season, the Dinos finished last for the first time since they joined the league in 2013. With the regular season done and dusted, it's now the business end of the season. Will the Doosan Bears continue to blow teams away, or will we see a surprise? We'll find out when the postseason comes to an end in early November. Lee Seung-jae, Arirang News.
Time to turn to Michelle Bach at the Weather Center for the updates you need. Michelle, fine dust is back pestering the nation again.
That's right, Daniel. Now, as China's smog adds to the dust already accumulated in the nation, fine dust concentrations have risen up to a point where wearing a mask is no longer a choice, but necessary. Now, the central region and most parts of the western regions will see dust levels go down tomorrow, but the southern regions will have to face the opposite of the fine dust. Now, the conditions generally tomorrow will be clear under the influence of high pressure front. Meanwhile, Beijing will have a drenching afternoon while Tokyo stays overcast with some lots of clouds throughout the day. Now, keep in mind our morning temperature is very low compared to our daytime, so are beginning at 9 degrees Celsius, while Busan and Jeju are still in the teens, starting at 14 and 15 degrees respectively. And our daytime highs will slightly be lower than today's, however, at most of the nation rising or nearing into the 20 degrees mark. And the weather is expected to stay mild this week, except over in Hamdo province of the East Coast, where it'll get some rain until Thursday. I'll leave you with the weather conditions around the world.
That's all we have for you in tonight's edition of Arirang News Center. Wherever you may be tuning in from, thanks for staying with us.